Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I want to look at the week starting on Monday, October the 28th, 2024. So, as far as what I want to do in this video, just to give you a broad structure, I want to start off by looking at what are the main events this week, astrologically. We have got stuff going on. For example, there's a new moon this week, and that's something that I want to talk about. And there are other astrological events. And really, I just want to do a sort of blow-by-blow account of these astrological events. And, later in the week, when I do my daily forecasts, I'll be looking at these events in greater detail. But really, part of this video is just giving you an outline, a sort of a preview of what's happening over the week starting on Monday, October the 28th. Now, having done that, I want to consider the question of Kamala Harris. Now, I've spent a long time looking at Kamala Harris's chart, and I kind of wanted to shut up about Kamala Harris. But still, I suppose, this video, I put it out over the weekend. Not so many people watch this video. Of all the videos I do, the one I do for the week ahead gets the lowest viewing. And so perhaps I can be a little more indulgent here. But with Kamala Harris, you see, the problem I have here is that I'm quite into politics. I'm quite interested in politics. Since I was a child, I've always sort of looked at current affairs programs. I've looked at politicians being interviewed, and coming to America. I've got quite interested in local politics, and I've gone to city council meetings. I've looked at local politicians giving explanations at sort of hustings. I've seen local politicians trying to, persuade people to vote for them. So I've looked at politics from a sort of a local level and at sort of the highest level, at least as an observer. And, what I find absolutely amazing about Kamala Harris, and I mean this not in any sort of partisan way, there's no reason not to vote for her, but she strikes me, maybe this is just a personal thing, but she just strikes me as being completely hopeless and completely wooden, and this inability to speak off the cuff, this inability to just be spontaneous, to answer questions, to just respond in a sort of normal way. I know other people have said this, but it just strikes me as being amazing. I'm also amazed that so many people don't actually see it. It's as if, at least in America, and from what I can see, what people, for example, in the UK are saying, there's a lot of people are so obsessed about how awful Trump is that they find it impossible to see anything that might be wrong with Kamala Harris. They see her as being sort of perfectly reasonable. But I'm pretty sure that there is an issue, and I'm just wondering why. Why is this happening? She is a lawyer. She's been politically successful in terms of being district attorney, whereas in San Francisco, being attorney general in California, and becoming a senator. So given that experience, and of course she's just had nearly 4 years in the White House as vice president, given all that experience, what is the problem? And I've looked at her horoscope before, but I feel that I do need to look at a horoscope just one more time, just to almost try to satisfy my own curiosity. Because, I'm just wondering, what is it? What actually is it in her chart that is causing this issue, which is making her so unspontaneous? And, I think the general consensus is that she is a terrible candidate, that if, it's an election which it seems likely that she's going to lose. I've given my own forecast, that she's going to lose. But that aside, it seems likely that she will lose. And okay, it's nothing is a sure thing. But if the Democrats had chosen someone else, or perhaps anyone else, they would have been perhaps heading for victory. So it's because of the way she just can't deal with it. And so astrologically, I wanted to just look at this question again. Now, some of the things I'm going to say in this video about her I have said before, but again, this video is a kind of a review video where I just look at the week ahead in review, and perhaps I'm just going to go over Kamala Harris's horoscope one more time, although I'm going to say some things I haven't said before, and hopefully that will sort of make some sense. Now, having looked at Kamala Harris, I want to consider the I Ching. So I do an I Ching reading for the week, and if you don't want your I Ching read, then you don't have to have it read. You can just stop watching a video when I come to the I Ching section, watch something else, watch another video, and this I Ching reading will be in 4 sections. I'll be looking at doing a general reading, then money, then career, and finally relationships. Okay, so let's start looking at what's happening this week. So just a reminder that if you happen to enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you are not subscribed and you enjoy this video, I'd be really happy if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Anyway, let's look at what's happening this week. So this is the chart for the beginning of the week set for New York. And, this is sort of midnight on Monday. And we can see some of the sort of main things going on at the beginning of the week. We've got the moon in Virgo, and we've got the sun in Scorpio, and Pluto still in Capricorn, and Mars. Mars is doing stuff. So on Monday, Mars is right at the end of Cancer. Now, the thing about Mars is it is moving very slowly at the moment. It might seem at 27, 26 Cancer that Mars is about to move into Leo. But that is true. But actually, Mars doesn't move into Leo until right at the end of the week. In fact, it doesn't actually move into Leo until Monday if you're in sort of Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, that's Monday of not this week, but Monday of next week. And Mars, right at the end of Cancer, on this Monday, Monday the 28th, makes a trine to Neptune in Pisces. So really that's what the week starts off with, Mars trine Neptune. I mean, Mars trine Neptune is not a bad aspect. It's not like a square with Neptune. I mean, Mars square Neptune can be a bit of a problem. It can be deceptive, and we can sort of be throwing our energy into the wrong places. It can be a bit sleazy. I mean, you could perhaps say the same with Mars trine Neptune, but it's sort of more of a gentle influence. And, for some of us, it might be quite a spiritual thing, having Mars trine Neptune. Mars is about where we put our energy. Mars is in a water sign, trine Neptune. We might want to put our energy into things of a spiritual or perhaps artistic nature. I mean, that would be a good way to use the Mars trine Neptune. Though I suppose it is a trine, and I suppose things could get carried away if we're not careful, or we could get carried away if we get sort of involved in sort of mindless indulgences. And I suppose with Mars trine Neptune, things like alcohol and drugs, we should steer clear of that. Neptune is the planet of alcohol and drugs, so be a little careful there with Mars trine Neptune. I suppose it depends on the situation. Also on Monday, we've got a sesquiquadrate aspect. This is Monday the 28th. We've got a sesquiquadrate aspect between the Sun and Jupiter. So they are 135 degrees apart. So that Sun-Jupiter sesquiquadrate may tie in with that Mars trine Neptune. It might be about overindulgence. Sun and Jupiter together as a pair can take things too far. So on Monday, some of us might be a little sort of up in the air, and we might not quite know what we're doing, and we could overindulge ourselves. That is certainly that's certainly possible. And also at the beginning of a week, we have got Mars making a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. Now that Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn is potentially quite a difficult aspect. Sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees, that's 3/8 of a circle. And, I do regard close sesquiquadrates as important aspects. And Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn, can be about frustration. Things are not moving as fast as we'd like them to move. And we may just get annoyed and angry with Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn. And in terms of our view of the world, some of us might be a little bit negative, and perhaps events happening out there could have a negative impact on us. When we look at what's happening in the world, it's scary what's happening in the world, and there may be particular events of a Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn nature. Mars sesquiquadrate Saturn as a pair, they are both sort of malefic planets. Saturn, the greater malefic. Saturn, the greater malefic. Mars, the lesser malefic, and together, they can cause, death and destruction, and so we have to be aware of their negative influence. Then on Tuesday, we have Mercury opposition Uranus, Tuesday the 30th. Sorry, have I got that right? That would be Tuesday. Is that Tuesday the 30th, 28, 29? Sorry, that's Wednesday the 30th, I think. Wednesday the 30th, we have Mercury opposition Uranus. Let's make sure I've got that right. Wednesday the 30th. Yeah, Wednesday the 30th of October, we have Mercury opposition Uranus, and that can be quite a difficult aspect. Okay, that depends where you are. It might be a little bit into Thursday. Depends on your time zone. But Mercury opposition Uranus. Mercury can be about the mind and the way we communicate. Mercury opposition Uranus can be about surprises. The things people say can surprise us. And the things we say can surprise other people. And there may also be a certain sense of agitation with Mercury opposition Uranus. Then, kind of appropriately, Thursday is Halloween, and the moon moves into Scorpio on Thursday. Quite when it moves into Scorpio kind of depends on your time zone, but I suppose with moon moving into Scorpio, I suppose it fits the day, doesn't it? Halloween, moon in Scorpio. Scorpio is the sort of sign of life and death and resurrection, and this is what Halloween and it's essentially a festival of the dead, isn't it? I mean, in the sort of America and Britain, we sort of see it as being sort of occulty and ghosts and pumpkins and that kind of thing. But, in much of the world, it's seen as a time, in the Catholic world, for example, it's a time you look after the graves, and you visit family graves, and you are linked, with the dead. And so, it is appropriate indeed that the moon is in Scorpio. Then on Friday, we have a new moon. So in a sense, Friday is the first, and indeed, November kicks off with a new moon, and new moon in Scorpio. I mean, I will be talking at length about this new moon, so I don't want to say a great deal about it. I don't want to say a great deal about it in this video, but the new moon, it's the beginning of a new lunar cycle. And you could say that is a good thing. The moon is now waxing rather than being waning. When your moon is waning, the moon is getting smaller until it finally disappears. And it's difficult to get things done on a waning moon. And because we're in a declining cycle. But with a new moon, new cycle, new things are happening. And I suppose we're all sort of working up then towards the election. At least we are in the US. And then over the weekend, we've got Mercury moving into Sagittarius. You can see at the beginning of the week, Mercury was at 21 Scorpio, but by the end of the week, it's moved into Sagittarius. Mercury moving into Sagittarius. In some respects, that's fun. Mercury moving into Sagittarius. Mercury's in Scorpio is a bit... I won't say grim, but perhaps not as talkative as it would like to be, and perhaps too focused on feelings. And Mercury isn't so comfortable with that. But perhaps Mercury moving into Sagittarius, that gives things sort of a new spark. Mercury moving into a fire sign. But on the other hand, Mercury is in its detriment in Sagittarius. Mercury is a planet about thinking and looking at the detail, looking at the facts, and Sagittarius is too wide-ranging for Mercury, and so Mercury can jump to conclusions, and Mercury can get overexcited, and so that might be something to watch out for with Mercury in Sagittarius. Then, right at the end of the week, we've got Mars opposition Pluto, and we've got Venus opposition Jupiter. Mars opposition Pluto. Again, this is an aspect I will be talking about at length at the end of next week, when I look at what's happening over next weekend. But Mars opposition Pluto on, I think that's Sunday the 3rd of November. That's could be about power struggle, and the question of how much power do we actually have. Then, at the same time, you've got Venus opposition Jupiter, a rather different energy, Venus opposition Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter, they are the two benefics. Venus is a lesser benefic, Jupiter is a greater benefic, and Venus opposition Jupiter can be quite generous and free-flowing, but it can be a little bit overindulgent, and sometimes with Venus opposition Jupiter, we do have to be a little bit careful with money. And just mindless entertainment, just doing things, not really thinking about the consequences. So that's a broad picture about what's happening over the course of a week. And now I want to look at Kamala Harris again. I know I've looked at her too much, but we have got an election coming up. She is trying to be US president. It is a big deal. And it's not just because I'm in America and I'm interested in politics. It does matter who wins this election. And it's just never the case that it doesn't matter. So I wanted to look at her horoscope, and I wanted to ask, what is the problem? Why has her performance been so bad? Why is she... finding it so difficult to be spontaneous? Why does she constantly need a teleprompter? Why does, there was a town hall debate, where she couldn't recently, where all the answers were written up beforehand, and I think she even gave the answers on a teleprompter. A town hall is not a town hall debate, but a town hall, where people can ask the candidate questions in a sort of a free-flowing way. She couldn't do that, and I just do wonder, what it's about. We all have situations when we get stuck. It reminds me of, decades ago, I did this counselling course. I was in my 20s. I did this counselling course. I don't know why I did it, but I did it. And there was this exercise that completely floored me, totally floored me. And the exercise was like this. Everyone was in a circle, and the exercise was you had to turn to the person sitting next to you and pay them a compliment. That's all you had to do. And so it came to my turn. Now, the thing is, you have got about 2 seconds basically to pay someone a compliment. The longer you hesitate, the worse it gets. And I couldn't. It wasn't that I had any opinion on the person sitting next to me. Wasn't about me having any any negativity about them. I'm a Gemini. The idea of, at least the way my brain works, it's not just me being a Gemini. It's probably because I've got Mars rising in Taurus, but I just couldn't do it. And of course, it was just so embarrassing. It was a complete disaster. And after 5 seconds, I'd blown it. And I understand that feeling, and I do understand perhaps some of the issues maybe that Kamala Harris is experiencing. I mean, she kind of glosses over it, but like when she's asked about what a mistake she might have made in the past or something, and she can't answer the question. So it is a real issue. So what is it astrologically? So let's look at her chart and ask ourselves what might actually be the issue. And what I find myself spending a lot of time looking at is the fact that she's got a full moon. And I do want to consider her full moon. And the thing about Kamala Harris's full moon is that it is exact. And she's got moon in Aries, opposition, sun in Libra, and it is exact. Now, in terms of her being successful, you can see that, I suppose. She wanted to be she was a prosecutor, and she's got moon in Aries. I mean, moon in Aries is really nice in a way. If particularly in a female chart, the moon in Aries is perhaps more descriptive than the sun in Libra. Moon in Aries is about being dynamic and assertive and being spontaneous. I mean, that's perhaps how moon in Aries should be. And I'm guessing that in the past, when she was younger, when she wasn't worrying about politics or other things, maybe she was able to use that moon in Aries. Maybe in her everyday life, that moon in Aries is completely available. But it's not available, apparently, in terms of her campaign and how she's actually able to carry her campaign through. And I mean, you could say, well, the moon in Aries is sextile Saturn. So with moon in Aries sextile Saturn, you see she's got Saturn on the midheaven. Saturn on the midheaven is very ambitious. You could say it's hard-working. And so maybe as a young lawyer, she was hard-working and she did what she had to do. I mean, that might be a possible interpretation of it. But the moon in Aries is supposed to be spontaneous. The moon in Aries is supposed to be her, who she is. And I'm just wondering about the impact of that full moon and the fact that it is so close. Now, if you've got a full moon, that doesn't mean you can't be successful. It doesn't mean to say that you can't be a successful politician. I mean, okay, I mean, who's she standing against? She's standing against Donald Trump, of course. And Donald Trump has a full moon too. I mean, Donald Trump has his sun at 22 Gemini and his moon at 21 Sagittarius. Whatever you think of him, this is his third presidential election. He's won, he won the first one. He lost the second one. I think he's going to win the third one. But so that sun opposition moon is not a complete issue for him. Now, I do think, though, with that sun opposition moon, we may be seeing a certain amount of rigidity here. I think he's not entirely comfortable, at least that's my impression, when things are completely off script. And I'm thinking particularly of, I don't know whether you ever saw Ali G, So Ali G, what was it, Sacha Baron Cohen in the sort of late 1990s, sort of Ali G visited Donald Trump, and Donald Trump didn't take well to Ali G, and it seemed that, you know, this idea of doing something a bit different, not acting according to a supposed script, you know, him being the famous Donald Trump, and Ali G was being a little bit ridiculous and not being respectful, and Donald Trump had a few issues with that. So I think there is a certain amount of inflexibility to Donald Trump. And I do see part of his inflexibility. For example, people go on and on about the fact that Donald Trump has an issue with dogs, and he's the first president for sort of 150 years, or maybe for longer than that, who hasn't had a pet in the White House. There's sort of a inflexibility. If you watch these videos, you will know. But I always have to worry about. I've stopped worrying about it. There's always a barking dog. But sort of the chaos of having a dog. You know, when you have a dog, you have to deal with that sort of animal chaos, don't you? You never quite know what the dog's going to do, but you have some understanding of the limits to what damage the dog is going to cause. But still, Donald Trump is not into having the chaos of having a dog, and there's a bit of structure there. Maybe that's something to do with the full moon and the inflexibility of the full moon, perhaps. But that full moon, in terms of him being able to communicate, I mean, he certainly is able to communicate. And what he says may be random, it may be outrageous, and he sort of speaks without thinking. I mean, I think the reason for that is because he's really speaking through his moon in Sagittarius. I don't think he's speaking through his Mercury in Cancer. The moon is how he communicates, and it's Sun in Gemini. Moon. But so, yes, Donald Trump has a Sun opposition moon. It's not an exact Sun opposition moon. It's not an exact full moon. And there are other politicians who've got full moons. I mean, if you're into UK politics, for example, I don't know, Priti Patel. I think she was the Home Secretary. She's still a member of Parliament, but I don't have a time of birth for her, but she has her moon in, probably a moon in Libra, a sun in Aries, and she is someone who's certainly quite able to express her opinions, unlike Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has a full moon, seems to not be able to express herself in a free and spontaneous way. With Priti Patel, who was a British Home Secretary, and of course she's in opposition now, but she's certainly able to express herself, whatever you think of her. Or someone who is likely to be the next leader of a Conservative Party, and is Kemi Badenoch. So she has her moon in Cancer, sun in Capricorn, and she's certainly very much able to express herself. I mean, she's very outspoken. She's quite often quite angry, and she has a good grasp of policy. So there's nothing being hidden here in these two British female politicians who are born close to a full moon. So what is the problem? Or if you're into Indian politics, Rahul Gandhi, who is son of Rajiv Gandhi, and I suppose the grandson of Indira Gandhi, who's an important opposition politician. I don't know quite how things are going for him, but I think he had a relatively good election, as far as I know. His profile, I believe, is increasing, but don't know a great deal of Indian politics. But he has moon in Sagittarius, sun in Gemini. It doesn't seem to get in his way about as far as being reasonably successful in politics. Of course, it does help that he's a member of a Nehru family. That's always a big advantage in Indian politics. But the full moon doesn't seem to get in his way. Yet, with Kamala, it certainly does seem to be getting in her way. And I'm wondering if it's the exactitude, the fact that it is so close. And the sort of famous person who I'm thinking of who also has a very close full moon is a close cardinal full moon. So if we go back to Kamala Harris, so Kamala Harris has got a cardinal full moon, moon in Aries, opposition the sun in Libra. Princess Catherine, Prince William's wife, she has a full moon, a very close full moon. It's okay. It's not quite as close as Kamala's full moon, but it's still pretty close. And maybe with this full moon being so close, we're starting to see a little bit of a problem with Catherine. It is perhaps the rigidity of the royal position, and I think that of her royal role, and I think that she's kind of a little bit straitjacketed in it, and that's would be the nature of the full moon. And you think of her poor moon in Cancer conjunct the North Node. Moon in Cancer is this sort of emotional side of herself that sort of needs to she needs to have security and be able to just be herself emotionally. But that sun in Capricorn, the sun in the 6th house in Capricorn conjunct the South Node, representing her royal duties and everything holding her back. And you think of the great sort of pressure she must be under, which can't be very good for her health. I'm not saying it's necessarily connected with her cancer diagnosis. By the way, I should mention that there is no connection between the astrological sign Cancer and the disease Cancer. But still, I think a lot of us, when looking at Princess Catherine over the last year, have, I think, felt quite sorry for her, and the fact that it is a very difficult place to be sort of married into the royal family. And that's the full moon and the straitjacket that full moon perhaps provides. So when we think about the straitjacket, maybe this is what we're seeing with Kamala Harris, because that full moon is so close. If it was a couple of degrees apart, maybe that would be fine. The further apart it is, the more flexibility you've got. I mean, another female politician who's kind of got a full moon, moon in Aries, sun in Libra, is AOC. You see, AOC has kind of got a bit of a full moon chart, but her moon is at 3 degrees Aries. Her sun is at 20 degrees Aries. So this is a massive orb. This is like 17 degrees apart. So there's plenty of flexibility there. I'm sure AOC is quite able to express whatever she thinks. She's much more of a free spirit from Kamala Harris. And I don't think that her full moon, and is such a problem because it is so wide. And by the way, I think AOC, in many respects, has got quite a good chart. And I know a lot of people don't like AOC, have ideological issues with her, but I would not write AOC off. I think her political career is unlikely to stall. Okay, things can happen short term, but I think she does have a good chart. But I'm not really going to talk about AOC here, but I'm just showing you that AOC is someone who's got the sun in Libra and the moon in Aries, like Kamala Harris. But it's not that full moon because it's so wide. It's not such a straitjacket. But with Kamala Harris, it's just too close. That is, I think, the problem. And so what you might have is that the moon in Aries would be her trying to express herself, and that's her, that's the free spirit. But the sun is completely holding her, something is holding her back. Something is cramping her style in quite a major way. And I think it's like, because it's so close, as the full moon gets closer, you start to get more and more rigidity in the system, less flexibility. Of course, looking at Donald Trump's full moon is in mutable signs. So because it's mutable, there is by definition a certain amount of flexibility. But this is okay. It's not in fixed signs, but it's in cardinal signs. But it's so close that the sun may be overwhelming, and the sun is in Libra. The sun is fallen in Libra, and so maybe perhaps we can actually see the sun as being in some ways quite malefic in terms of just preventing her from being herself. Now, we get further evidence by looking at the wider structure of that chart. So the thing about Kamala Harris's chart is that she's got Saturn on the midheaven. Nice. Saturn on the midheaven. Sounds nice, doesn't it? I mean, Saturn is in Aquarius, close to the midheaven. That's about being successful. So that's okay. She's got North Node on the ascendant. Again, that's great. I mean, North Node conjunct the ascendant. North Node is a benefic planet of the nature of Jupiter. It works especially well in Gemini. So that's great. And it's trine the sun in Libra. So on the surface, we have this wonderful grand trine in air signs. And maybe to an extent it is working. Sun trine Saturn is someone who is hardworking. Saturn on the midheaven, who is ambitious and is able to plough solidly towards achieving whatever she needs to achieve. So that's Saturn. Then the Sun is trine North Node. So it's all working very well together. But there is another way of looking at this grand trine, and you could say that we've got a kite. So a kite is a combination where you've got a grand trine and you've got an opposition here. So there's your grand trine. Then you've got moon opposition the sun, which is the spine of the grand trine, or the spine of the kite. Then the moon is sextile Saturn, and the moon is sextile the node. Very nice. But if we see that in midpoint terms, we might see it in a different way. We could say, okay, she's got Saturn on the midheaven, but she's got the node, she's got the moon and the sun on the Saturn node midpoint. And it may be that full moon on the Saturn node midpoint is actually making it difficult for her to get on with people. I mean, obviously she was very good at getting on with people. I mean, apparently she would, by day, she'd be working as a lawyer. By night, she would be, partying and making connections and all this kind of stuff. And this was her sort of modus operandi, and it worked very well for her. But there seems to be a limit. It seems that perhaps when she goes beyond, maybe a San Francisco bubble, that Saturn node kicks in, and so it's preventing the moon from really expressing itself. So that moon is under a lot of pressure, and we see that moon sextile Saturn, and we see it as an advantage. But when we actually see it as part of a wider structure, the moon on the Saturn node midpoint, or pretty close to the Saturn node midpoint, then we see that her spontaneity is being curbed, and people out there are perhaps beginning to notice it. And we can see this in terms of a 160-degree dial. So it's a zodiac, but it's just turned into just numbers. 360, that's 0 degrees. Aries, that's 0. 30 is 0 degrees. Taurus. So let's just put the dial on her. There's her full moon and sun, and you can see that. Look at the midpoint. There's the MC Saturn conjunction. There is the the North Node ascendant conjunction, and the moon is on the midpoint, and the sun is on the midpoint as well. So that Saturn is, I think, causing a lot of problems in terms of just preventing her from really being able to express herself. And I do think that's important. Now, another thing about Kamala Harris's chart that I think it may be critical is that, you see, what's happening with Kamala Harris is that as her political career has developed, she is expanding her social horizon. She's expanding her reach. So I suppose at the beginning, when you're developing your career, you start off, I suppose you have to relate to people, I suppose, on a one-to-one level, and then you relate to people, you have to start to make your contacts. I suppose that's what she did in San Francisco. So you can see that sort of relating to people as a one-to-one level, that would be the ascendant. That's what it is. Or developing your ambitions, that would be the midheaven. And then sort of making contacts. If you take the German view of the nodes, for Ebertin and Witte, you would see the nodes as being just about contacts. And so that would be. But then at a certain point, as you sort of move from to be vice president, you're dealing with the world. And it's no longer just the ascendant or the midheaven or the nodes. It's the Aries point. And the Aries point represents the world. And so at that stage, we have to start to think about the Aries point and what that actually means. And this is also a sort of a traditional idea, because in traditional astrology there was this sense of the anticia. So an anticia is when you reflect something through the solstice points. And so the solstice points, 0 degrees Cancer, 0 degrees Capricorn, they are square they're square 0 degrees Aries. So this reflection across the solstice points is quite an important thing. Now, the thing about Kamala Harris's chart is that, and I think this is really important, and she has a trine between Mercury and Saturn. And we talked about trines. We talked about her grand trine in air, and I've suggested that this grand trine in air may not be quite as good as it sounds when we start to actually see it in a midpoint sense, when we start to see the full moon on the Saturn North Node midpoint. That's just not so good. And her Aries point is, here's 0 degrees Aries. And the solstice points are, of course, 0 degrees Cancer and 0 degrees Capricorn. And she has got, you can see she's got a Mercury-Saturn trine. Now, you'd say, well, Mercury-Saturn trine, you could say, well, that's nice, isn't it? Because she can study hard. I mean, she did fail, I believe she failed her bar exam first time, but I assume she passed it the second time. But capable of studying hard. Although, some people have said that in terms of her preparation, it has been suggested that in terms of her preparation for recently, she's been a bit lazy. That has been suggested, well, I suppose by her political enemies. But Mercury-Saturn can be quite focused. But the thing about Mercury-Saturn is that if you take Mercury, and I've said this before, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself sounding boring, but if you take Mercury and you reflect Mercury in 0 degrees Capricorn, you reflect Mercury across it, it gets to Saturn. It's the reflection of Mercury in Scorpio across the solstice point is 28 degrees. Is 28 degrees. 28 degrees Aquarius. And likewise, if you reflect Saturn across the solstice point, you get to 1 degree Scorpio. I mean, let me just show you what I mean. So if we let's put on the dial let's put this on the dial the solstice point. We'll put 90. Let's move this. We'll move this dial to 90 degrees. And there you can see that Mercury and Saturn are exactly reflecting each other across the solstice point. Now, the solstice point represents the world at large. And I suppose in terms of a presidential campaign, it's all those people that are listening to the debates, they're listening to this supposed town halls, which are very scripted, listening to whatever 60-minute interviews, Fox interviews, listening to everything, listening to, well, in that being aware of events you don't turn up to, like, for example, not turning up to the Al Smith thing, which was, I think, generally seen as a disaster. But the Al Smith thing was, of course, really significant because Al Smith was this traditionist, where candidates, presidential candidates, they went to this thing, this very prestigious dinner, and they supposedly give humorous speeches. I mean, that's just something not Kamala Harris could not do. Poking fun at herself. Of course, Trump was quite able to do it, and she sent a video of herself, and I think that rather backfired. But this is Mercury Saturn on the Aries point. If the Aries point is the world, Mercury Saturn is about the inability to communicate, not being able to communicate, and just being stuck. And so I do think that is a problem, and I think that's why she's having so many. Part of the reason, I think the full moon is part of the problem. But I think as soon as she starts to move towards a sort of a national audience, okay, she got away with it with the vice presidency. I mean, it wasn't so important when she was Biden's running mate. She did okay when she debated Pence in 2020. But this time round, when she's the centre of attention, when it's truly become global, when she can't pull it off, and I think part of it is because she's got Aries, Mercury and Saturn are. The Mercury-Saturn midpoint is square 0 degrees Aries, or it's, if you like, conjunct the solstice point. And there is another way of looking at this, and forgive me if this sounds far-fetched, but it's become quite common to compare people to Hitler, hasn't it? I mean, Kamala Harris has been comparing people to Hitler. And the thing about Hitler is that Hitler had his Mars-Saturn on aspecting the Aries point. And Mars-Saturn is the death pair, obviously, certainly in his case. So Aries is the world at large. Hitler had Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and he was someone who was able to inflict death and destruction on millions of people on a whole continent. And so that was his impact on the world. So I hope you don't see this as a political point, but you could see Mercury-Saturn as being censorship, about the restriction of free speech. Already some Democrats have suggested that there's too much free speech, particularly on social media. And this is from an American perspective. Remember, the best thing about America is the First Amendment, but the idea about potentially curtailing the First Amendment, for example, in terms of social media. For example, if you, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you write a comment on Facebook, for example, and it's inflammatory or whatever, Facebook, I believe, again, correct me if I'm wrong, are not liable, and it's because that is free speech. How can Facebook be expected to police that? But I think some Democrats are questioning that. They think there should be more restrictions. So it may be that if Kamala Harris became president with Aries on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint, the net effect might be, in terms of how the world is affected, or at least how America is affected, but that freedom of certain what seem to be First Amendment freedoms may actually be restricted. So that's certainly a possibility. And talking about Mars-Saturn, so going back to her regular chart, one thing that I do think is interesting about Kamala's chart is the fact that she has got Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So there's Mars at 21 Leo, and there is Saturn at 28 Aquarius, and you can see Jupiter square Saturn, Jupiter square Mars, and Jupiter is it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So she's got actually Jupiter conjunct fairly close to Algol on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Mars-Saturn is about death, it's about destruction, it's about decay as a pair. Jupiter is about how you benefit, how you gain, how you move forward. Remember, Jupiter is actually ruler of her 10th house. And so it may well be that her deciding to be a prosecutor, and I think people were surprised that she wants to be a prosecutor and dealing with victims of crime, and maybe she was quite effective, maybe she was standing up for victims of crime, but that might be Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint in some way choosing this as her career, this as her path forward. I'm not blaming, I'm not criticizing it. It seems that perhaps it's very honourable to do that, but maybe it's part of her success, having a career where, as a prosecutor, focusing on, other people, what bad things happening to other people, and actually being able to use it to benefit her career. As again, I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with doing that, but that may be the effect of Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It's about benefiting from bad things, or I suppose you could say benefiting from other people's misfortunes. And you might also say that this is actually the case in terms of what has happened, in terms of how she has become a presidential candidate. She benefited from Biden's disastrous debating performance. And there is a view that other members of the Democratic Party knew that she was going to be a disaster, but Biden just said it had to be her, and wasn't going, and endorsed her very quickly. And so maybe Biden in some way represents the Mars-Saturn opposition, and somehow she was able to benefit from him in terms of actually becoming the Republican nominee for the presidency. So, I'm sorry I've gone on about Kamala Harris for far too long, but I did feel that I just wanted to say some more things about her, because I do see that her chart as being, well, I think her chart is certainly very interesting. I find it a fascinating chart, but it just is so difficult to understand why she's making such a mess of the campaign, and why she is finding spontaneity and openness so difficult. And I think that the full moon plus plus Mercury and Saturn being plus the Aries point being square the Mercury-Saturn midpoint, and Mercury and Saturn being on each other's antisia, may go some way towards explaining what is going on. Anyway, that's it with Kamala Harris, and now I want to turn to the I Ching. This is how I'm going to finish. I want to finish with the I Ching, and so just a reminder, if you don't want your I Ching done, you don't have to have it done. You can, you can stop watching a video now. You can find another video to watch. This video, the I Ching section, my I Ching reading is only for people watching that part of a video. So if you don't want your I Ching done, you don't have to have it done. You can you can just stop watching the video. Anyway, so let's look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday the 28th of October going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got, now remember, this video is in 4 sections. I'm going to have a general section, then money, then career, and then relationships. So looking at the general picture, the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 62, which is preponderance of the small. And this is indicating that to begin with, we need to take it slowly. We mustn't have big ideas. I mean, okay, we can have big ideas, but we certainly shouldn't be acting on these big ideas. And one of the images of this hexagram is it's a bird, and the advice given to this bird is, well, don't fly too high, because if you fly too high, everyone can see you, and if there's a hunt, you might get shot down. So what the bird needs to do is stick to the undergrowth, and so the bird can't be seen, and in that way you can stay safe, and just keep those ambitions in check, and then things are likely to be okay. And also, just holding back might be a good idea, because holding back, it might feel there's an opportunity to do something amazing over the course of a week. You feel good about it, but the advice is still perhaps to hold back, because by holding back, we may be showing our modesty, and we may be showing our, I suppose, a sense of responsibility, and that might actually get noticed. So in fact, we might get more favourable attention by a disciplined approach, by not feeling we have to plough forward. So just keep it light, and don't be too ambitious, and just be satisfied with small gains. Now, because there is a moving line, this hexagram shifts to something else, and it shifts to a second hexagram, which is hexagram number 31. And so this hexagram 31 is influence. It's getting people to notice us, and people do notice us, but we have to do it in a slow way, and gradually we will get more attention, and we can start to make connections with people, and our influence will be felt, and we don't have to be in a hurry, and it's just important to be patient. And from an astrological point of view, we have a new moon on Friday, I think, on November the 1st, and so up until Friday, up until November the 1st, we've got a waning moon. This is not a time to be starting big things. It is a time to be perhaps cautious, be restricting our activities, not flying too high. But then, perhaps at the beginning of a month, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, things will start moving and we will start to have more of an influence. Turning to money, then I think it's quite straightforward. Preponderance of the small. We shouldn't have big ideas about money. It's certainly not a week for spending a lot of money. It's not a good week for showing off our money. Okay, I don't know. You watching this, you'll have all sorts of financial situations. Some of you are going to have more money than others, but money is always scarce. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. There's always a sense of financial scarcity, and so don't throw your money around. Don't give any indication that you have money. And if you are trying to make money, then do take it slowly. That you might have perhaps ambitious ideas about how you can make money quickly, perhaps. But if you follow these ideas through, well, there might be cause for regret. And I suppose, this thing about keeping a low profile, if you go too high, if everyone notices you, then you are vulnerable. Perhaps if everyone notices that you've got money, or that you've got, even if you haven't got money, but you've got money to spend, you advertise this, then you might get the kind of attention you don't really want. That's when the bird flies too high. Or it just could be having financial ambitions that are too high. And I suppose it does depend on your situation, but you do have to be cautious, and depending on the situation, if you can demonstrate that you are careful with money and that you are looking after your own resources, it may actually get noticed, and people may actually appreciate it. And in the end, preponderance of the small, it does move. It moves to influence. So this influence maybe there's some sense in which you are looking for money, or you're wanting more money, or money is owed to you, or whatever. It's something like that. But to begin with, there's nothing much you can do. There's nothing much you should do. But perhaps towards the end of a week, you can start being heard. People start listening to you. They listen to what you want. They listen to your grievances, things that are bothering you. Maybe there are people who can help you financially. Maybe there are people, if you're in some kind of partnership with them, there can be a financial benefit or some negotiation or something. It can start to work in your way, but you just have to take it slowly. There's absolutely no hurry. And then there is career and business. And with career and business, first hexagram is preponderance of the small. So in terms of your work, of course, it may not be that you do work. It may be you're retired, whatever. But I suppose we have to have something for everyone here. And with preponderance of the small, you might feel that, or you should feel that, there's not a great deal you can do in the short term. Do take it slowly, and don't be too ambitious. I think that would especially apply, of course, if you have your own business, or you've got ambitions about your own business, or if you're in a position at work where you're making decisions about the future of what the company does, or if you're perhaps if you're in a senior position, I don't know what quite your job is, but if you have a job, you might not have a job again. It depends on the situation, but don't be over ambitious whatever you're doing, because if you're over ambitious, you are straight away making yourself vulnerable, and things could go wrong very quickly. And you should be satisfied with small successes, small gains. And if you run your own business, it's not a good time to be expanding in a sort of crazy way. Just be happy about getting some business, any business. Just be happy, and there's no need to sort of try to advertise at too frantic a pace, or to don't take on too much work. Just do understand your limitations. And if you do that, and you show yourself to be modest, I do think that you will be appreciated and you will seem trustworthy. And this hexagram, preponderance of the small, does move, and it moves to influence, hexagram 31. And so with influence, you're going to be able to get people to notice you. I mean, it may be unspectacular, it probably will be unspectacular, but people will notice what you're doing and what you can do, and they'll notice they'll notice your skills. It may not even feel that anything is happening, towards the end of a week. You may just feel that you're not being noticed, but yeah, actually you are being noticed, and it's just your example and perhaps your modesty and your down-to-earth approach is getting noticed and is getting appreciated. But don't feel you have to try too hard. In fact, it's essential that you don't try too hard. But in the end, with the right attitude, I think things really are going to be moving your way, but moving your way slowly. And finally, there is relationships. Remember, when I'm talking about relationships, I'm talking about relationships of all kinds. Partnerships, relationships, business partnerships, romance, whatever you want, whatever's important to you. And so, hexagram 62, preponderance of the small. In terms of getting on with other people, getting closer to other people, perhaps finding new people, don't be too ambitious. Don't be in too much of a hurry to get in touch with people or to get to know people. It's just not the time for giving things away or for, I suppose, loosening boundaries. You have to just be sensible and don't spend too much time attracting attention. I mean, you might feel that it's important, that you have to make a special effort to enhance a relationship or to find a relationship. But the I Ching is saying no. Just be satisfied with just getting on with people, talking to people, being with other people. But don't try to think beyond the situation. Just accept it, because if you try to move too fast in any kind of relationship, then it's not going to work. Because if you move too fast, you're going to reveal too much about yourself, and you reveal too much about yourself, and you're going to make yourself vulnerable. Maybe emotionally vulnerable. You could be vulnerable in other ways, and you don't quite know what the other person's motives are in certain cases. Although I suppose we could be talking about a long-standing relationship. But even with a long-standing relationship, there's an ebb and flow. And perhaps in terms of even long-standing relationships, it's not, perhaps things aren't working completely fine and you just have to take it slowly. So, be patient. And it's just very important not to be in a hurry. And the more sort of low-key you are, I think the more people are going to like you and the more they're going to respect you. And in the long term, it may be easier to find the right relationship if you are low-key. Or indeed, the easier it is perhaps to enhance an existing relationship if things are low-key. And we do have a moving line. And as a result of this moving line, we move to hexagram 31, which is influence. Now, from a relationship perspective, influence is actually a very good hexagram because, certainly in the Wilhelm translation, it says 31, influence, and then in parentheses it puts wooing. And so the implication here is that you may have a chance to slowly get closer to someone. I mean, I suppose if you're thinking about romance, you think about wooing as a very sort of romantic concept, but I suppose you can woo people in all sorts of relationships. Business, friends, friendship, but whatever relationship is relevant, it's about taking the steps to get someone onto your side, to gain someone's trust, and I suppose to perhaps understand, to start to work out whether you can actually trust another person. But it's a slow process, but it's a persistent process, and you are having a growing influence, certainly by the end of a week. And that is going to certainly help you in terms of, all the relationships around you. And that's the I Ching. So that's it. That's what I've got to say about this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you are not subscribed, I'd be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.